You may indeed be a great wrestler, Ted Dibiase, but I can't help but think tonight you're up to something.
It's not what I'm up to, Okerlund. It's what it all comes down to. And what it all comes down to is this. Money isn't everything. It's the only thing. And everyone has a price for the $1 Million Man.
All right.
Thank you, Joe, and it's a real pleasure, honor to be with you here today. And you know, a lot of you might be sitting here going, "Oh my gosh, you know, it's a room full of insurance agents. What does this pro wrestler have to say to us?" Well, that's a very valid question. I hope that I can make that clear. First of all, now you don't have to be embarrassed or ashamed. If you are a wrestling fan or have been, and you know who the $1 Million Man, that character I played, was, just raise your hand. Wow. Well, if you remember him, then you remember this. Everybody's got a price for the $1 Million Man. There, I had to get that out of my system, you know, at least once, you know. And of course, if you're not a wrestling fan, then I'll give you just a little background about who this guy was. The character that I was chosen to be, the $1 Million Man, who was a character who basically, his god was money. Basically, by virtue of his wealth, he thought that there wasn't anybody or anything that he couldn't buy, and he would go out on a weekly basis to prove that everybody had a price for him and that he could buy everybody. And of course, the one thing everybody hates is a guy who looks down his nose at everybody and thinks he's better than everybody by virtue of his wealth. And I don't know, maybe a lot of you in this room know a lot of people just like that. But this was a character that I was chosen to play. And actually, it's really true. I mean, everybody does have a price. I mean, I got $100 on me right now. I mean, you know, for somebody here that's willing to bark like a dog. Bark, 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 bark. See what I mean? There you go. It's all chopped up, but it's $100. That's the $1 Million Man. Yeah. He always had a way of offering something, and then at the last minute, you know, he took it away. One of the things that I get asked about all the time, we were in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and we were getting this character over, and I said, "Well, what's Milwaukee famous for?" And somebody said, "Well, basketball and beer." I said, "Well, we can't go beer." So we got a basketball, and I invited this young man, about 5 years old, up onto the platform, and this was rehearsed. And I said, "Pal," I said, "if you can dribble that ball 15 times without missing, I got $500 for you." So he gets to 14, I stick my foot out, the ball bounces off my foot, he doesn't get it, and I jolt the little kid, and he goes running to his mom crying, you know, so, but he did get the money. I keep waiting. One day that guy's going to walk up, and he's probably about 6'6" now, and he go, "Remember me?" But, so you understand how much Ted Dibiase understands the value of insurance. I was fortunate to have been raised by a very loving stepfather. Mike Dibiase married my mother when I was 5 years old. And my dad was not only a professional wrestler, but he was a national amateur wrestling champion out of the University of Nebraska. 1946, I believe, AAU National Heavyweight Wrestling Champion, one of 4 athletes in the history of Nebraska to letter 7 or more times. I didn't know any of that when this man came into my life and became my dad. I just knew that he accepted me and loved me as his very own, and I loved him and wanted to be just like him. And there came a point in my dad's wrestling career where he just got fed up with the whole thing, and he said, "I'm just not going to do this anymore. The travel, the time away from home, you know, the disappointment in promoters not living up to their agreements." And so he quit for a while, and he joined a friend of his from high school and started selling life insurance for Franklin Life Insurance Company in Omaha, Nebraska. And of course, we had life insurance. Well, there came a time when things got pretty tough, and my dad said, "Well, we got to do something here." So I said, "What I'm going to do is I'm going to drop this for right now, and then we're going to pick this back up on the other side." And we moved from Omaha to Texas in the summer of 1969. My dad's plan was to wrestle for maybe a couple more years, and then retired to Arizona. And my grandmother, my mother's mother, had a restaurant out there, and you know, bring pizza into this community. And he had his dream, he had his idea. Well, that summer he had a heart attack in the ring during a match, and he died. And we had no insurance. That life insurance policy was gone, which forced my mother and my brother and I to move back to Arizona with my grandmother in this little town, Wilcox, Arizona. How many of you know where Wilcox is? Okay, that's pretty good, because usually it's none or maybe one. Wilcox, of course, is a town that even today has 3, maybe 4 traffic lights. It's on Interstate 10, about 80 miles southeast of Tucson. And so I landed in Wilcox, Arizona with big dreams and wanting to know if my dreams could come true there. But the reason that my mother was forced to move back in with her mom and her kids to Wilcox, Arizona, is because this insurance policy was no longer there. It put her in a situation that she didn't have a choice. And unfortunately, my mother, in her grief and her despair and in this situation, sank into alcoholism, and she battled this and over a period of time. She had good days and bad days, but ultimately she died at the age of 56 years old of complications due to alcoholism, and she never recovered. She never recovered. So I know about that, and I know from my own personal life, there came a point in time in my career where I was offered the opportunity to get disability insurance with Lloyd's of London. When I found out how much money they wanted, I told my wife, I said, "There's no way, I ain't doing that. Are you kidding?" My wife looked at me and she said, "Honey," she goes, "you're not 25 anymore." She goes, "As a matter of fact, you're not 35 anymore." She says, "Please do this for my peace of mind." And so I did. Well, 1 year later, after all of a sudden experiencing neck pain in a match in Japan, I was taking the normal bumps we take, and I got up and they shooting pains down my arms and starting to get numbness in my fingers. I go to the doctor. He says, "You have 2 ruptured discs, C5, C6. He said, "You could have surgery and go back to work." He says, "But Ted, you're almost 40 years old." He says, "I recommend you retire." He says, "I'm not saying it would happen." He says, "But you run the risk of getting dropped on your head and then you're paralyzed." And all of a sudden, I'm looking at retirement. And but because I did what my wife told me to, you know, behind every successful man, there's a good woman. I had disability insurance, and that disability insurance enabled me to take the time to decide what I was going to do and what direction my life was going to take. And so with that said, I know full well the value of insurance and what you people do and the product that you sell. And I am a recipient of it. As I stand here right now, you know, I have, you know, part of my retirement account is a very large life insurance policy that would help my family in the event of my death, you know, tied into an annuity with a life insurance company. So what you guys do is invaluable. But what I want to share with you today, I'm going to be your coach. I want to give you the pep talk. You know, again, you know, what's wrestling got to do with insurance? Well, I have a message I call the 3 C's of success. And irregardless of what you do in life, irregardless of, you know, whether you want to be a pro wrestler or a rocket scientist or, you know, the garbage man, the secrets of success are all the same. And basically it comes down to hard work and determination, a willingness to work as hard as you can to be whatever it is you want to be and make the sacrifices necessary to get to that goal, and a commitment to follow through. Those 3 C's, courage, commitment, and character. Before I talk about that specifically, I would say this. What you're doing right now, are you passionate about it? Are you in the insurance business because you're passionate about it and you are passionate about not only the product but the people that you're helping? Because if you're not passionate about what you're doing, I would say get out. Do something else. I remember when I went to my dad when I was about to enter high school in Omaha, Nebraska. And I said, Dad, I want you to get me in shape to play football. And he sat me down, and again, this is a dad who was an unbelievable athlete. And he said, before we do this, I want to ask you a question. He said, son, are you doing this because it's what you want to do? Are you doing it because you have a burning desire to do it? Or are you doing it because I did it? And somehow you think that in order to please me, you need to be just like me. And he said, because if that's your purpose, he says that you're doing it for all the wrong reasons, and I don't want you to do it. He said, what I expect of you is to pursue what is in your heart. Because whatever you're passionate about, if you're passionate about it, you're going to be willing to make those sacrifices. You're going to be willing to do whatever it takes to achieve the goal. And I never forget that conversation. And it was true. And I told him, I said, no, Dad, I said, I want to do this because I love it. And I had grown to love it because I had grown to love him so much and wanted to emulate him. But as I played college football, there was a couple of guys I played ball with, and I would watch them come in, and they had a calendar in their locker, and you could just see them mark off the day. So finally I asked a guy one time, I said, it just seems like it's just, it's drudgery. He said, well, it kind of is. And I said, well, why are you playing football? Well, my dad always wanted me to be a ball player. So what you're telling me is you're living out Daddy's dream, not your dream. And I'll fight with any parent in the room. We want our children, and we want the best for our children, and oftentimes we think we know what's best for them, and oftentimes we can guide them, but ultimately, it's got to be their decision. It's got to be their decision. Sometimes, even if you do know what's best for them, sometimes you got to let them make mistakes so they learn from those mistakes, or they're not going to grow. But I'll never forget that because that stuck in my mind, and it's what carried me, and it's what helped me become successful in my field of endeavor. What is your dream? Are you living your dream right now? And a part of that is recognizing your talent. Wrestling is sports entertainment. I hope I didn't break anybody's heart. You'd be surprised. Even after we've announced to the world, yeah, we're sports entertainment. Oh, I know it's real. What are you smoking, Junior? Recognize your talents. You may want something passionately. You may love it, but are you really talented enough to do that? Are those your gifts and talents? I mean, I'm one of those guys. I love to watch American Idol. And there's a lot of people I've seen get up there are passionate about singing, and they can't sing a lick, and they just walk out the door after three judges who know more than anybody else, what the talent is, and they're arguing as they walk out the door. They don't get it, do they? I said, no, pal, you don't get it. You don't have that talent. So recognize your talents first and foremost. Courage, I believe, is the first requirement in being successful. The courage to chase your dream, the courage to step out when sometimes people will say, you're crazy. You can't do that. I remember the stories that my mother would tell me about my dad, who grew up in a poor Italian neighborhood in South Omaha, Nebraska. And a lot of the kids in that neighborhood, my father's peers, were going out, the old story, getting drunk, raising hell, having a good time. And while they were doing that, my dad was working out and chasing a dream. A lot of his friends laughed at him, told him he was a dreamer. But he was the kid that came out of South Omaha to go on to be one of the greatest athletes in the history of Nebraska athletics, because he was willing to pursue the dream, because he was willing to make those sacrifices, and the courage to follow through, the courage to follow through to his commitments. And I tell my sons this all the time. I said, anybody can follow the crowd. That's easy. It takes a real man to stand up and cut your own path, let somebody else follow you. It takes much more strength to do that. Roosevelt once said, far better it is to dare mighty things, to win glorious triumphs, even though checkered by failure, than to rank with those poor spirits who neither enjoy nor suffer much because they live in that gray twilight that knows neither victory nor defeat. You never know unless you try. you're never going to know what you can do unless you have the courage to step out and do it. So what does it take to dare mighty things? And make no mistake about it, setting and achieving goals is not for the weak at heart. And I think it's courage. It's just, it's the courage to fail, to strive, to grow, to be successful, even just the courage to be human. I'm reminded that courage is not the absence of fear, but rather courage is the conquest of fear. The man that I have worked for, and I'm not in full-time, I am not an employee of the WWE World Wrestling Entertainment at this time. I am on what they call a Legends contract, where it's kind of like I'm, kind of like an attorney on retainer, only I'm not a liar. Sorry, it just came running out. I have I've made myself available, when they request me to come back and make a cameo appearance on the show or make an appearance representing the WWE, and I will make occasional appearances for them, but I don't work consistently. My full-time job is that of an evangelist. I am an ordained minister, and that's what I do. I wrote a book about that too, Wrestling to Ministry. That's a big leap. Yes, it was. But as I have looked at Vince McMahon, he is not the character that you see on television either. And he basically, Vince McMahon, the character that he portrays on television is the character that he gave me in real life. I mean, as a matter of fact, in discussing this character, he was presented it to me. He was called to a phone call for a moment, and one of his right-hand men sitting in the room at the time said, Ted, he says, you have to understand something. He said, this character that he's presenting to you, he said, if Vince could put the tights on and climb in the ring, this is who he'd be. He said, so you're a fool if you don't jump on this. And I jumped on it. Because after Vince said, you know what, wrestling is show business, but in an effort to market this character, we're going to send you all over the world in first class. You're going to stay at the finest hotels. There'll be limousine service every day. It's a tough job, but somebody had to do it. And the only two guys that got that kind of treatment back then were Hulk Hogan, who was our biggest star, and a guy named Andre the Giant. Well, Andre the Giant was 7 feet 4 inches tall, weighed 450 pounds. Where else are you going to put him? He ain't going coach. But I have watched Vince McMahon, and if you know his story, the story is there was a time early in life before he was working for his father that he actually declared bankruptcy once. And then when he took over the company from his father and he started this idea, WrestleMania. If WrestleMania 1 had not succeeded, he would have declared bankruptcy a second time. But Vince has consistently had the guts to throw everything out there on the line. And, even if you're not a wrestling fan, the WWE is a multi-billion-dollar corporation today. It's a publicly held company. Vince McMahon is obviously the #1 stockholder. We're talking about a company who goes worldwide now. I mean, we're even going to China, and I guess that's a good thing because we might be speaking Chinese if we don't straighten up. WrestleMania consistently sets attendance records. Why? Because we put them in this great big stadiums. As a matter of fact, we just had WrestleMania, I think 27, Georgia Dome, and almost 72,000 people, because we filled the whole arena, and then we filled everything on the floor except right where that ring goes. It still holds the indoor world attendance record, 93,000 people at the Pontiac Silverdome at WrestleMania 3. Teachers in college teaching marketing students use the WWE as their model. And again, I admire the tenacity of Vince McMahon. He is not the ogre that a lot of people think he is. And like anything else, like any other company, it's grown through the years. But here's a guy that probably sleeps 4 to 6 hours a day. and he's driven by what he does because he's extremely passionate about it, and he wants to be the absolute best. I remember when they started doing what they call Saturday Night Main Event, where our show took the place of Saturday Night Live once a month. And when NBC came in to do those shows, Vince paid very close attention to what NBC was doing. And if you watch Monday Night Raw or Friday Night SmackDown now, you will see state-of-the-art programming, an unbelievable what they do. The presentation of WrestleMania is nothing short of what you would see at the Super Bowl, including the flyby jets overhead and the fireworks and the whole deal. People come from all over the world for WrestleMania. It's become a huge, huge multi-billion-dollar industry. And why? Because of the passion and the commitment and the drive of Vince McMahon. Vince is 65 plus now, and it was a couple of years ago. He was on the cover of Muscle and Fitness, and people, oh well, he's taking steroids. Well, let me answer that question for you. No, he's not. He's been he's been enthusiastic about weightlifting all his life, and his company has a state-of-the-art, what they call their wellness policy today. First-time offense, 30-day suspension. Second-time offense, 60-day suspension. Third offense, you're fired. And if you need rehab, the company will put you through rehab at their expense to help you. Beyond that, you're on your own. So, but again, I share that all with you because I look at the drive of this man. A man who took wrestling. I mean, I never dreamed in a million years that I would wrestle one day all over the world, that my likeness would be made into action figures and be on video games. And as a matter of fact, you can still buy my action figure. Did you know that? It's called the Classic Series. That's right, because I'm an old guy. Matter of fact, the last one that came out, my youngest son, Brett, looked at it and he said, "Dad, when did you ever look that good?" Just telling him to shut up and mind his own business. So courage. Do you have the courage to fail? Do you have the courage to step out when everybody else says you're nuts, don't do it? And follow your heart, follow your desire, because that's what you're going to be passionate about. That's what you will surrender to. And just back to the basics, and again, I'm a Christian, and I am not politically correct. The Bible says you're going to reap what you sow. It doesn't say you're going to reap what that guy sows. Yes, it says, Jesus said, feed the hungry, take care of the widow, the orphans, visit the prisoner in prison. And he said, when you do this for the least of my brethren, you do it for me. But you feed the hungry with some fish, but then you teach them how to fish so they can feed themselves. And that's what we need to do. You have to be willing to be that committed. And following courage would be commitment. Committed to it. Commitment to your spirituality, to yourself, your family, your organization. Commitment to your goals. And to be the best that you can be. Commitment requires action, and action requires both a written plan and a tracking system. Just keeping track of what you commit to in your head isn't enough. Write down your commitments. Write it down. Put it on paper. Verbalize them to those people you trust and respect and who will help you keep you on track. In other words, be accountable. Check your progress regularly and make the necessary course corrections as required. When you commit something to it, it's like if you make a vague commitment, I think I'm going to do this. Well, chances are the first thing that comes along that is a bump in the road, then you're not committed anymore. But if you make a commitment to something and you write it down on paper, you post it on the wall, this is what I'm going to do, and then you tell your best buddy, hold me to this, then you're more likely to follow through. Number one, the devil is in the details. In W. Clement Stone's book, The Success System That Never Fails, he uses the phrase, little hinges swing big doors. In other words, it is the little things that can and absolutely do make a very big difference in our ability to achieve what we desire. Again, the example I just cited, Vince McMahon. Vince paying attention to what he saw going on. It wasn't like they just came in and did their show. When they came in and did their show and they took over and they set up, he was paying very close attention. And to this day, the man amazes me. I mean, because he micromanages, and I think sometimes to a fault. And I don't know how the guy does it. I mean, I don't know. I went back to work for them for about a year and a half, a few years ago, behind the scenes, part of their creative team as an advisor, and would travel. I would do Raw on Monday, SmackDown on Tuesday, which aired on Friday, and every Tuesday night we'd be on the company jet back to Connecticut. Now, this is after 2 long, hard days. We're talking about days that started at about 10 o'clock in the morning with a production meeting, and then after the production meeting, you're getting with the talent and you're putting this show together. Then there are some things that are rehearsed, and then you do this show, and then you go to the next town, and you do the same thing on Tuesday. Very long, grueling days. And on Tuesday night, we're going back to Connecticut. Everybody's on that plane like this, and there's Vince over there. He's already got the book out. He said there, and I looked at him one night, and he looked up at me, and I said, "Does it ever stop?" And he knew what I meant. And he goes, "I can't stop it. It's just always running." That's the kind of guy he is. That's how driven he is. And I'm going to tell you what, I wouldn't be standing here today talking to you. I wouldn't be making trips to places like Germany and Scotland and England and Ireland to do autograph signings for pretty good money if it hadn't been for Vince McMahon's drive, who has provided this for me. Commitment. Be organized. Plan your work your plan. Peter Drucker says, efficiency is doing things right. Effectiveness is doing the right things right. Why not plan on being effective? There are many tools on the market today to keep you organized. Are you using those tools to obtain maximum results? Once every month or two, check to see that whatever system you are using is keeping you focused on tying in your goals, values, and commitments to your daily action. That's great. 3, understanding. Make it a daily habit of increasing your understanding of what yourself, your clients, your family, and the people with whom you have daily contact. Sometimes it's easy to forget that behind every customer, behind every client or sale is a person. And I would say especially in what you guys and girls, you men and ladies are selling. Behind every sale is a person and a family. And are you committed to them? Or are you just committed to the sale? The topics and solutions you present to your prospects and clients may not be new to you, but may represent new thinking or revelations to them. A wise friend gave me some advice early on in my career. He said that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And remember to listen with your ears, but to hear with your heart. And even in ministry, especially in ministry, what I do now, the guy who said that to me is a pastor of a big church in Phoenix, and then he went out to Los Angeles and he planted a church that is now, it's technically called the Los Angeles International Church. It's affectionately known as the Dream Center, the church that never sleeps, the 24/7 church. They took over a 9-story abandoned hospital in the worst neighborhood in Los Angeles. And they have transformed a community. They have transformed a neighborhood that was one of the worst ever by reaching out to people. In other words, not just going and preaching, but demonstrating their love to them by what they do, going and knocking on doors, seeing how they could help them. It's an incredible story. But it's right there. My father-in-law worked for Sears for years. He was the guy who I says was large and in charge. My father-in-law would be flown around the country, and he would go into a city, and he was the guy. He was the foreman. He was the guy. He built Sears buildings from the ground up. Then he stocked them, and then Sears would send him to the next one. You know, and he told me one day, he said, "You see that sign over the door, son? Satisfaction guaranteed." Well, it used to be the truth, but it's not today. It's not today. You know, when my grandmother was running her truck stops, you know, when I was a little kid, when you would go to a gas station, they were called service stations. And the guy would run out and he would gas up your car, he'd check your oil, he'd clean your windshield, you know, and check the tires in the air. That was all part of you showing up and getting the gas. Now, you pump your own gas, and a lot of places you can't even get air or water. Where's the service? Where's service in our country today? I think we fall real short of what we used to. You know, it's become all about the almighty dollar. My grandmother, in running those truck stops, I remember when I started going to work. One thing that I learned from my dad, you know, my dad who came up in this very poor Italian family, who came from Italy. They were immigrants. And, you know, the first time I mentioned the word allowance, well, you should have seen the look I got. He said, "Son, you want money, you work. You work." And I remember one summer I went I would go every morning to a golf course that was near where we were in Texas, in Amarillo, Texas. And I'd get there about 5:30 in the morning. About 6 o'clock, these guys would show up, and I would carry a guy's golf bag, 18 holes, as a caddy for $2 to $3. That's 1966. And over the summer, I would take this money and I would put that money in this shoebox. And at the end of the summer, my dad said, "Okay, you've done that. Now we're going to match your money." And they bought me the first brand new bicycle I ever owned. Now, when I got that bicycle, the first thing I bought was a chain with a lock and chrome polish. And I parked that bike like people park a new car, way out there where nobody's going to open their door and scratch it. Why did I do that? I did that because I earned it, because I worked my tail off and I put in the work to do that. And then with my grandmother, when I started bussing dishes in her restaurant, I did everything from bus dishes to, ended up a short order cook, waiting tables. And I remember waiting tables, she said, "Son," she says, "the customer's always right, even when they're wrong. Do everything you can to make them happy." And when somebody, if you're doing something, because there's always work to do in a cafe or a restaurant. If you're doing something, he said, number one, he says, when somebody comes in and sits down, you drop what you're doing and you go and you give them a menu and you give them a glass of water, right away. Don't make them wait. And then when somebody's leaving, you drop what you're doing and you go and you take their money. But that is the principle of service. And the more you serve people, well, again, it's a biblical principle. You can't outgive God. And again, the more you give, the more you'll receive. Number 4, responsibility. You and only you are responsible for your own success. It can be easy to complain about not having the right tools or training or systems in place to help you to be successful, but the bottom line is that only you have the control to do what is necessary to guarantee your own success. Become a student of your business or profession. Remember, the only constant in maturing is change. Now, that's worth repeating. The only constant in maturing is change. Because if you're going to, I was an athlete all my life. I played high school and college football. I became a professional wrestler. And even when I got to be one of the top guys, the top of my field in the wrestling world, I didn't stop learning. I didn't get to the place where I thought, I've arrived, you can't teach me anything anymore. The only constant in maturing is change, because if you get to that place where you think you're a know-it-all, that you think that you've conquered everything in your little world and you're the king of it, that's called pride, number 1. But not only will you seek to go forward and learn, but you'll even begin to regress. You'll begin to go backwards. And we have to all constantly mature and change. And my dad was a great example of that as well to me. and his example. Goals, number 5. Your goals need to be your own creation and should be meaningful to you. Goals need to be, again, written. Have a time frame for completion. Be broken down into bite-sized pieces and should be reviewed and worked on every day. Another important fact to remember about goals is that it's okay to change them. Some people become paralyzed when it comes to setting goals. They feel like they need to get it 100% correct before proceeding. Not true. It's more important to begin the process and then make changes as you go than never have begun at all. Remember that achievement is related to the struggle. Little struggle, little achievement. Big struggle, big achievement. I know, for example, in the WWE, WrestleMania, our marquee event, if you go into the WWE and into what they call the writer's room, they have 12 great big chalkboards, or boards kind of like that, erase boards. And they have a pay-per-view every month, and they just go January through December. But our year starts right now, after WrestleMania. And right now, they begin working towards the next WrestleMania. So they've already, in their mind, they've said, okay, this time next year, well, as a matter of fact, for the first time in history, they've already announced WrestleMania, the main event at WrestleMania next year, which will be held in the stadium where the Miami Dolphins play football, is The Rock versus John Cena. Now they've got a whole year to build to that, but it's the first time that I've ever heard them actually say, "Here's our main event." So it'll be interesting to see how they build this thing for the next year. But they start there, and then they begin working backwards. But if they try to stick to the plan and not have the flexibility to change that plan, because there's a lot of things that happen. Guys get hurt, there's injuries, or something comes up and like, you know what, this could be better. It fits this way better, and so you sometimes if you are so set on doing it one way, you're shooting yourself in the foot. Be flexible. Number 6, excellence. Strive for excellence in everything you do, but remember that striving for your goals and the pursuit of excellence are important journeys and not destinations. You'll never reach the end of the road, and isn't that terrific? Become a student of your business and separate yourself from the pack, and remember that school is never out for the professional, which is exactly what I just said. School's never out, because when you get to that place, then you're not as sharp and you're lackadaisical, and then you become, a critic of everything and a know-it-all, and nobody likes that. Number 7, activity and attitude. It's been said that you control only 2 things in your career: your attitude and your activity. Skill is rarely the element that distinguishes productivity. The motivational speaker Zig Ziglar, who I admire very much, speaking at a conference several years ago, asked the group 2 questions that I'll never forget. They were, when was the last time you had a checkup from your neck up? And do you suffer from hardening of the attitudes? 2 simple questions, yet they are very profound. Activity is the other key to productivity and success. Develop a bias for activity. Don't have too many good ideas and not enough people to share them with. The old axiom, talent without action ceases to exist, is certainly as true today as ever. Attitude determines altitude. That's an old axiom too, and it's just so true. Is the glass half empty or is it half full? As long as you have an optimistic attitude, that's that driving thing. That's the driving thing I see in Vince McMahon. Like Vince is like, there's a lot of things I think could change in our industry too. And there's a lot of times, I remember when I first saw what Vince McMahon was doing, I was the old era of wrestling and grew up, and we knew as wrestlers that most educated people or anybody that ever been in a real fight knew wrestling wasn't real. But we tried to protect that, just like, if you go to a show and it's a magic show, well, there is no real magic. It's sleight of hand, it's illusion. But how do they do it? So we would just tell the people, yeah, we're real. And you may not, you know it's not really real. And a lot of people would say, well, you know what? Those first 3 matches, they were fake. But those 2 guys in the main event, they're trying to kill each other. No, it's just that those 2 guys in the main event were really good at what they do. But we protected that. But the attitude was, we're going to do the best we can to present this as real as we can. And you hang on to that. And that's what drives you. We knew, we understood, but we still tried to present it as real as we possibly could. In other words, as an entertainer, I walk out the door and I think as if it's real, but in reality, then what we call work. We have our terminology is shoot. You think shoot, which means it's real. We're really going for it, but then you work, and it presents it much more real. That's how it works in my business. And the last one is character. And I saved this one for last because I think it's the most important one. And I really think that this one is the foundation of all of it. No matter what it is your goals in life are, no matter what your job or your career pursuit, character is the foundation of everything. And what exactly is character? Character is a set of behavior traits that define what sort of person an individual is. It determines whether a person will effectively achieve goals, be forthright in dealing with others, and will obey the law and rules of the group. Bottom line, character is about your honesty and integrity. Character is who you are behind closed doors when nobody can see what you're doing. The cornerstone of character is honesty. Are you a man of your word? You see, I believe that a real man is a man of his word. And a real man gives his word, and his word is his bond. And quite frankly, a man is only as good as his word. And if his word isn't any good, he's worthless. And so that's why we need to clean house in Washington. I'm sorry, but I don't care if you're a Democrat or a Republican. There's a lot of people up there, and they're not serving the interest of the people of this country. They're serving the interest of their party. Our country is $14 trillion in debt and growing. The Democrats wanted to cut $1.6 billion. Laughable. That's the interest that we pay on that debt daily. The Republicans said $60 billion. That's laughable. $60 billion on $14 trillion is like what the pimple on an elephant's nose would look like. It's just ridiculous. And if we keep going the way we're going, it's inevitable. It's going to fail, and the economy will fail unless our country turns around and starts living by the values that it was established on. And I speak to a lot of men all the time, and this is my heart. And just so you know, I was driven by my pride. I was driven by my ego for 20 years. Life was all about my career. My first marriage failed after 6 years. My second marriage nearly failed in 1992. Until a good friend, grabbed me and shook me up after I had been confronted by my wife and had to confess to her that I had been unfaithful. It's the hardest thing I ever did in my life. In facing her and in looking in the mirror and taking a long, hard look at Ted and realizing that the most valuable things in my life were the things I was putting at risk to stroke my ego. Yeah, on the world stage, I'm a huge success. I'm making big money. I'm doing really good, but I'm driven by my ego. What I had put at risk for all those things was the love and devotion of a committed wife, the future, stability, and the peace of mind of my children. For what? To stroke my ego? What a fool. What an idiot. But I returned to the values that I was raised on. I returned to the values that were instilled in me by my father. I had no idea that it would one day lead me to surrender to be in the ministry, which is what I do today. But that's just it. when my life changed is when I decided that I was going to be a real man. That the focus of my life was first and foremost that my job wasn't the most important thing, my family was. And the most important thing I could do was to serve them as best that I could. And in serving them, serve my community, serve my business. I go back, and that's why I try to help the WWE as often as I can, because I'm trying to give back to them, and I'm trying to give back to the people that supported me, the fans. And you can't, the Bible says you can't outgive God. Well, that's another thing about service. The more you give, the more you will ultimately get in exchange. Character. I tell folks this all the time. Your kids won't always do what you tell them to do, but I promise you they'll always do what they see you do. And in 1992, had I not made the choice that I made to change my life and to refocus my values back to what I was raised on, and I think that's what this country needs to do, is to go back to the roots of what it was established on. Because if we don't, we're going to fail. We're Rome and we're burning right now. Better start learning Chinese, or we're going to be owned by them. If not, what's going to happen? We have the power to do it, and we have to make some tough choices in this country. Will we do that? I hope so. I know that that decision in my life in '92, where I stand today, my wife and I are still very, very happily married. We're probably happier now than we've ever been before. But the reason that happened is because my wife watched me do an about face, and she began to see the changes in my character. She began to see the focus of my life turn from me and what serves me and getting a bigger house and making more money and all that superficial stuff. And she saw that what I began to focus on was my family, first and foremost, their needs, and to serve them as best I could. When all those things started showing up, that's when the trust and the respect came back in our relationship and our life. And I think that bleeds over into everything you do. I have a relationship not only with my wife today, but with my children today that are second to none. 2 of my 3 boys are going for it. My son Ted is in the WWE. He graduated from college with a degree in business administration. They said, Dad, I have honored your wishes and I got a degree. Now I want to chase my dream. And I said, that's great, son. What do you want to do? I want to be a wrestler. And I went, oh my God. He said, Dad, but I heard you say it. Go after your dream and after your heart. And he says, I've always wanted to be just like you. He knew just what to say. And he is a man of a very strong character and integrity. 1 year into that company, I was at a show. Vince walked up to me and said, you should be very proud of your son. He's got an unbelievable future in this company. And he paused for a second and he said, but what I admire most about Teddy is his character. And I shook Vince's hand and I walked away from him with tears in my eyes, because nothing meant more than that. Lead by example. And remember, people don't care what you know. They don't care to know what you have to say to them until they know you really care. Once they know that you really care, then they're going to be more willing to receive what it is you're offering them. And live by principle. Live by that character. Live by serving. And the more you serve, the more you give of yourself. It's and it doesn't always come back to you right away. We live in a country now where we want the return and we want it now. It's like going to McDonald's, man. You sit there 2 minutes. Where's my food? That's our society. That's the way it's been going for some time now. That all needs to change. Again, your word is your bond, and you're only as good as your word. You're only as good as your word. And that's what I do every morning. I get up and I look in the mirror and I go, take it, Ted. Are you going to live by your word today? And integrity says that even if, it's like sometimes, you make a bad deal. You make a bad deal and you realize, oh my gosh, that I could do better over here. It could be better this way. And you could cheat to make it different. Keep your word. Keep your word. Your talent can take you to a place where your character won't sustain you. That's the last thing I'm going to share with you. Your talent can take you to a place where your character won't sustain you. I don't care how talented you are. I don't care, if you're the top salesman in the company. Irregardless of your talent, if you have character flaws, well, for example, I relate everything to sports. In my profession, we've had a lot of talented guys come through, a lot of guys who were tremendous athletes, tremendous entertainers, and their talent took them there, and they were doing good, they were stars, and they were making big money. Because they had those character flaws, many of those guys, some of them are now dead because of drug and alcohol abuse, and some of them are maybe not be dead, but they're just getting by, and they're divorced, they've lost their families because of their lack of integrity. Other athletes, in the NBA, the National Football League, a lot of these owners of these teams, they're finding out too. It's like they sign all these very young men to these great big contracts, and they give them all this money, and they're not ready for it. And they're not ready for it, and so you invest in this great quarterback, or you invest in this great agent, and they got character flaws, and because of those character flaws, what you've invested in that person all of a sudden is out the window, and it's gone because, he does something stupid and he dies in his hotel room of an overdose. Or was the football player in the New York Giants, Plaxico Burress, shot himself in the foot with a gun he had on his person, which he wasn't supposed to be carrying. So now he's sitting in jail not playing football. Well, all that the Giants had invested in that guy's down to, all the time that they took to get him where he was, gone. Your talent can take you to a place where your character won't sustain you. Character is the foundation of success. And when my life really changed, when my life really started to become genuinely successful, is when I went back to the principles my father taught me when I was very young, after allowing my pride and my ego to take me away. And again, another biblical principle, pride goeth before the fall. Amen. I believe that absolutely. And I went back to the foundational principles of my youth. And hey, I'm a minister today. Never dreamed that. And a lot of people who knew me would never dream that either. That's another story. I speak to a lot of kids. I speak in a lot of prisons. And occasionally I do meetings like this where I speak to professionals. And again, please understand that I speak to you today out of the conviction of my own heart. I speak to you today out of the failures in my own life. And just stand here to say to you, if I can turn my life around and live with the peace that I have in my life today, the joy that I have in my life today, because I can look in the mirror today and I can like the guy I see looking back. If I can do that and change and yet still be successful, then anybody can. And in so many ways, today I'm much more successful than I ever was in the wrestling industry. And that pretty much sums it up. So today, the two things, your talent can take you to a place where your character won't sustain you. And the only constant in maturing is change. Be willing to change, be willing to adapt, care about people first instead of just the sale. And it'll come back to you 100-fold. And live with integrity. Thank you so much for your time. And it's been a pleasure being here with you today. Thank you. And I just want to remind you to ask about 72T. Joe's sitting right here. Thank you very much.